We have a fundraiser on the 28th. Come to it and enjoy time with Chris, myself, and the rest of our staff. We expect to see you there. Recently, there were polls indicating that the Conservatives had the potential to win in Quebec against the Bloc Québécois. Considering how the CAQ are aligning themselves more with the Conservatives, and considering the razor-sharp margins of victory in the very recent by-election, I called up my friend and commentator, Frédéric Bérard, to discuss whether the Conservatives could possibly win Quebec, and whether Quebec has ever been progressive. We appreciate all your support, and we ask you to go check out the work that we do over in the link below, therover.ca/support-us or therover.ca/newsletter. You can check out all the writing that we're doing over there and all the extreme deep dive reporting that we are giving. Investigative journalism at its finest. Recently, the Gazette released a news article about how the Conservatives are starting to poll better than the Bloc Québécois in Quebec. And I find that to be an extremely interesting moment in time. Looking at historically, we've essentially never had the Conservatives pull ahead in a significant part of Quebec. It's there's ridings that like Conservatives and people who still do, but the Conservatives have traditionally been pretty anti-Quebec, except for maybe Brian Mulroney. But who would probably be one of the most pro-Quebec.
He was. That's for sure.
Yeah, which is why the Miche-like Accords falling apart lead to the modern day separatism.
Mulroney based his campaign in '84 on the fact that he wanted Quebec to be back in the Constitution and all that, and he brought a lot of sovereignists into his party, like Lucien Bouchard, Benoît Bouchard, Monique Vézina, and a few other people that were known for voted yes in the 1980s. So that was what we call the beau risque. In other words, to take the word of René Lévesque.
Is that your pig in the background?
Yes, those are my pigs. This is actually it's George right here for George Orwell, and you have Albert right there.
Hi, Albert.
For Albert Camus, and there's two dogs there, which is Che for Che Guevara and Lenin for Lenin.
I wonder what kind of person you are.
Well, that's a pretty good question, I guess.
Guys, let's start talking about this. So Fred, what has led to this shift away from the Bloc towards the Conservatives? What about Pierre Poilievre seems to be appealing to Quebecers?
That's a pretty good question. It's not Poilievre has not won anything yet. Don't forget about that. It's pretty close in most survey, but I think that obviously there's a lot of people in Quebec that are fed up with the Liberals, so they're trying to transpose their vote somewhere else. The voters who are federalists obviously will not go in favor of the Bloc. That's for sure. So what are the options that are left to them? It's clearly most of them will go vote for the Conservative in order to replace the Liberals, because they will not go to the NPD, which is related quite too closely to the Liberal as well. So I don't think it's very frankly, I'm not sure that it's a vote in favor of Poilievre, but rather a vote against Trudeau. So this is it.
Is this entire election that's coming up going to be basically a referendum on Trudeau?
That's pretty good one. Part of it, yeah. But you know what? If you could take a look at the survey, I mean, the referendum is already over, right? Trudeau is 15-20% back in those surveys in Quebec. I'm not sure he's going to be able to recover from that gap, which is enormous. And another thing that we need to consider is the following: Pierre Poilievre is another type of politician. He's made of another type of wood. He's very different, for the better and for the worse. I would say the worst most of the time, in the sense that he's very like harsh, very aggressive. He's not scared at all about lying, saying, whatever that could, fit its narrative. Don't forget that the guy is denying climate changes, right? And he's saying to his base in 5 or 6 times, he said that 5 or 6 times in the last year, that electricity comes from the lightning. I mean, who's stupid enough to believe that? You know what, guys? Forget about Hydro-Québec. Forget about all those guys. Electricity is made because of lightning. Thunderstruck is good for you. So who's going to believe that? And he said that many times, 5 or 6. So I mean, okay. I mean, what's happening with that guy? He wants to become the prime minister. So take a look. Go to X, the former Twitter. I mean, the message from the conservative is so harsh towards the bloc. I mean, it's incredible, and we all know that they have some robots and things like that, who personify some pseudo on X, and saying, pretty bad things about Blanchet, about his criminal past, because the guys have been convicted at the criminal level, and stuff like this, and it turns, I mean, 24/7, right? And they don't give the bloc even a slight chance, in the sense that they associate the bloc to the liberals, and they say that that's their slogan. It's the Bloc Libéral. They said that the bloc voted 238 times with the liberals. It's because of the bloc that the liberals are still alive, and blah 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 blah. The bloc does that only for the pension of its MP and all this. So I think that it has some kind of influence, because, in other words, I mean, don't forget that the bloc is vulnerable in a way, because the bloc is stuck in a sense with its independentist option. So if they don't want to talk about independence, and the bloc doesn't want to do that, then they need to talk about something else. But the other problem is that there's a large base of the bloc that is the same potential base of the conservative, which is the center and right wing. So the conservative of Poilievre are like aiming that base precisely and attacking even the bloc, the Blanchet, most of their MPs, blank, 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 trying to get that specific vote. And this vote is clearly outside Montreal. It's within the region, Quebec region, obviously, but in other region as well. So I have to say that it's a bit complex. There's a lot of things that are going on now, but the game changer is certainly Pierre Poilievre. For me, I mean, it's clear, because if you take a look to what happened in the past with the two former leader of the Conservative, Stoll and Andrew Scheer, they tried to conquer Quebec, but nobody care about them. But Poilievre is an aggressive, is a harsh politician. He's gonna play, he's gonna use the Trump playbook on many chapters, if I may say.
So what are the weaknesses of the Bloc Québécois in comparison to the Conservatives then? How are they able to take advantage of what are traditionally popular policies in Quebec?
As I said, it's going to be tough for them, because remember this summer, in July in France, there was that election at the legislative, and after that, the left won. Yves-François Blanchet just posted something saying, yeah, good job, all right, let's push away those far-right guys and all that. And a lot of people who are identifying themselves as a Bloc voters went on Twitter and said, you should be ashamed saying that. This is not far right. Are you telling us that you're going to vote? Are you going to tell us that you are a left-wing guy? Are you telling us that you blah, 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 blah? So Blanchet is kind of fucked up, to be frank, because, I mean, his electoral base is not a left-wing base. It doesn't fit the narrative at all. Most of its base is independentist, obviously, but within that movement, there's a lot of people who are center-right, or some of them far-right, like Mathieu Bocoté. So there's a very, that was a very awkward moment. And afterwards, Blanchet didn't post anything about that, about the left-wing stuff. He doesn't get involved in it. So, I mean, the weaknesses of the Bloc is this, in my opinion, because if they don't want to talk about independence, in my opinion, they will not to, because take a look at the survey. The independence as of now is at about 34, 35, 36, which is the normal rate in a way. So the Bloc will not win an election based on independence. So as I said, they're going to have to find something else. But what else? I mean, you can't go left because the right will complain. You can't go right because the left will complain. So you need to go with the expression, the interests of Quebec. All right, but what is it precisely? What are the interests of Quebec now? What are we fighting for in the Federation? The immigration, this and that. But what are the Conservatives are replying is well, actually, we are defending Quebec interests, because Quebec interests is to make sure that we have a strong presence in Ottawa, and that kind of speech. So all that to say that it's going to be quite tough, in my opinion, for Blanchet. Because when he's going to attack Poilievre, saying you are right wing, you are a populist, you are against immigration. Actually, most of people in the Bloc Québécois are against some kind of immigration to an extent or another. So all that to say that is kind of fucked up, frankly.
Do you think that the Bloc Québécois, the Conservatives are going to potentially take large amounts of Quebec due to the immigration stuff? Because the sentiment in Quebec is very negative towards immigration right now.
Yeah, well, actually, that feeling is towards immigration is mostly the same everywhere in Canada right now.
It is, yeah,
yeah, and it's the same in Occident. Actually, you see, very very bad things going on. Even in UK, who was known for being tolerant, you've seen this summer that group of far right maniac who set a hotel in fire, and that hotel was full of refugees. And Mathieu Bocoté said, well, there's nothing there. It's not racist to put the fire on a hotel full of refugees. Obviously, we need to understand those people, blah, 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 blah. That same shit. So I'll have to say that, yeah, immigration will be certainly one of the central points of that election. But at the same time, I mean, if you're Blanchet, how can you attack Poilievre on that? It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough, because I would say that they think mostly the same on immigration. Because Pierre Poilievre did not say, as Trudeau, we need to have as many immigrants as possible. I mean, it's actually he's very more prudent about it. He doesn't talk much about that. So frankly, I don't see what would be the playbook of Blanchet, except putting the emphasis on, well, that's the interest of Quebec. That's the interest of Quebec. So the French language, the laïcité, with the Supreme Court reference, not reference, the Supreme Court appeal. But what else? Actually, there's nothing going on right now who fits his narrative perfectly. So he's going to need to find out something to build a program that will recognize the relevance of the Bloc, because as of now, it's pretty like confused in a way. And I would add this, and I said that a few minutes ago, but I think it's important to repeat it. If Blanchet is trying to attack the populist side of Poilievre, he's going to attack a lot of potential voters who are influenced by what's going on in the U.S. with Trump and with the populist movement, with the Journal de Montréal. So it's a pretty tiny room for Poilievre in there.
Yeah. Do you think that the Bloc could win some more voters if they went left?
That's a good question. That's a pretty good question. I think that Blanchet did try this with the post that I talked to you about about the French election. And he said also, I think a few weeks earlier, something like that, the Bloc is left wing, whatever. You know what? The thing about it, I think that the answer to your question is might be yes. It might be yes. Why? Because, as I said, there's a lot of voters who are deserting the Liberal Party. Most of them were center or center left.
Yeah.
So where do they go? They don't want to go to the NDP. Most of them will not go to the NDP because, as I said, NDP is too closely related to the Liberals as of now. Maybe they will try with the rupture of the agreement they had. Maybe they will try to take their distance, and that will be profitable for Singh and Boulris and company. But as of now, I see that more like they're too closely related. So where the left-wing voters will go, they need to go somewhere. And I don't see any other option aside of the NDP and the Bloc. But the thing is that to go for the Bloc, you need to be independentist in a way, maybe not full time, but you need to have some sort of atome crochu, if I may say. So that will be a very, very interesting election because the reason you mentioned, and because of the fact that Poilievre is creating a maelstrom between the cards on the table. We're gonna see some shifts that we never seen in the past, I think.
Yeah, does this show that identity politics around Francophone people and Anglophones is waning?
Yes and no. Yes, because we're living in a populist period of humanity right now. You see that in Europe, you see that in the United States, you see that in South America, you see that in Central America, you see that in Asia, you see that everywhere. That's for sure. And Quebec is no exception. But what's here again, what is different is that you come with a Poilievre who is strongly Canadian, strongly federalist. So how can we mix that kind of populist without identity? And there's a way to do that, right? But let's say that the PQ is playing the card of populist identity, the CAQ is playing the same card, Poilievre is playing the same card, but they do it for different teams. This is this is why it is so tough to predict the next election. Because if you take a look at the narrative of Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, take a look at it. Take a look at the playbook. Here again today, he said, well, we need to protect gay and lesbian from the woke movement in a way, and from the immigrants who are more intolerant towards the LGBTQ movement. Where does that come from? That was an anecdote in the Journal de Montréal, whatever. And here again, they're playing on this. At the same time, you have Pierre Poilievre who's saying precisely the same thing. We need to be against the woke movement. Let's fight against the woke. So on this aspect, I mean, they are meeting in at some point, right? But on other aspect, you have Plamondon who is Captain Quebec. You have Poilievre is going to be Captain Canada. But they're playing, they're trying to attract voters from the same pool in a way, aside of the Quebec or Canada. So this is why it is so complicated to because there is no clear place where we can draw the line, say the voters will go that way, those voters will go the other way. There's some kind of hybrid voters now who are voting for populist party, but they are also voting either for Quebec, either for Canada.
Interesting.
I'm not sure if I'm clear enough, but
it makes perfect sense. How does the current federal polling, because obviously this is all polling, we're talking about hypotheticals, but it is a very proven science. So, go listen to the episode with Philippe Fournier if you want to know more. It was a great time. He taught us. I had Philippe on Canada, and oh my goodness, that man is
he's a machine.
He's a machine, that guy. But he was, he taught us about the fact that statistics are a very provable science. It is proven to work. It is something that is extremely effective, and it shows the score as of right now. And so we should accept that if the election was held tomorrow, that those polls would hold up. Now, we have a year before the election, but how does the current polling in the federal election in Quebec compare to the provincial polling in Quebec? How are those veering in different directions? How are they the same in some ways, other than the populism thing?
Well, for that question, I think the answer is mostly easy, if I may say, because it's the what differs from polls outside Quebec and in Quebec is the independence question. That's it. Because as for the rest, most Canadian voters are just fed up with Trudeau, and they're looking for a solution de rechange, right? They're looking for it. But here again, if you bring things back in Quebec, what are you gonna do? Are you mostly in favor of independence, mostly in favor of Canada? Either ways, if you're a populist, you're happy because you have Saint Pierre Plamondon on one side and you have Poilievre on the other side. But we're gonna have to decide what we're going to do with independence, even in the next federal election. Because what I think that what Poilievre's going to do is saying, if you vote for Blanchet, you vote eventually for a referendum, because this guy is there for only one reason, to get his pension from Ottawa and then separate Quebec from Canada. You know what? I'm telling you, look at Poilievre. He's a maniac. I mean, he's going to do a lot of damages, and there is no cheap shot that are prohibited in his mind. And his staff is just like him. So he's going to be very, very harsh on the Bloc, and he's going to put this, I'm quite sure, actually, I'm not sure 100%, but I'm quite sure that he's going to put the independence issue at the centerpiece of the next election. Saying, you vote Bloc, it's because you want to separate from Canada. And most people in Quebec would be like interested hearing about independence. You have a 35% that is like just as rock for the independence option. But as for the rest, a lot of them are very keen to let's say to talk about sovereignty, to hear about it, but maybe they're not keen to jump into the referendum wagon as soon as 2026. Because this is what Poilievre is going to do. A vote for the Bloc is like a vote for the PQ. It's like a vote for a referendum, and then it's a vote for sovereignty. Do you want that, or do you want us to fix Canada? Because Canada is broken right now because of Justin Trudeau, the inflation, the just inflation, and cut the axe and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. So I think that, it's going to be like very easy for Poilievre to say, I'm going to take care of you guys. I'm going to take care of you families. I'm going to take care of the middle class people. You pay too much tax. You pay too much this, too much that. I'm going to fix that. Fuck Davis. I'm going to, clean up this shit. I'm going to be like the guy that you need, because I'm going to bring back the gros bon sang, whatever that is. And this kind of message is way more powerful, unfortunately, than the independence message. Because people right now are suffering. That's the truth. I mean, they have problem to pay their rent. They have problem to pay their hypothec. They have problem to pay their cars. They have problem to pay their groceries. So bringing the independence as of now might not be the best timing, because a lot of people don't see the relationship between independence and my life will be better tomorrow morning. But if you have a guy with Poilievre who's telling you, let me do the gros bon sang things and make sure that you pay less for your grocery, your this and your that. I mean, it's 1 + 1, it's equals 2. Okay, I'm going with that guy. And the guy will be like all over the place. Don't forget about that. Look at this. The machine of Pierre Poilievre on social media is like, wow. Even with, and you have to add to that a few radios like in Quebec City and all that, who are like supporting Poilievre like 100%. It's not even like it's obvious. So I think that the one that once the Poilievre machine will be in March, I mean, it's going to be quite tough for the Bloc to resist.
When you compare Poilievre with La CAQ or PQ, who does he run closer to? Who is he more similar to, PQ or CAQ?
Who's that, Poilievre?
Yeah.
Actually, the CAQ and Poilievre, the CAQ and the PQ are the same party.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Well, les chats siamois, they're fighting for the same voters. If you take a look to the analysis of Philippe Fournier, they are looking for the same voters 100%, which is mostly outside Montreal, middle class, who are maybe a bit scared sometimes about immigration. They are very keen to hear, like, there are too many immigrants, we need to fix this and fix that. They're looking for identity measures, even though it's not quite clear what the result will be. They are fighting for the same pool of voters 100% or closely to 100%. The only difference is that the PQ is saying, I'm in favor of the independence, I'm going to work for it day one. And the CAQ is more like, they're not telling you that they're federalists, but they're telling you that they don't want a referendum, and they're telling you that they're not independent and they're not sovereignist, which equals to be a federalist in a way, obviously. So that is the only difference between those two. Now, it's going to be maybe tough for Saint-Pierre Plamondon. The more we'll be approaching the next election in 2026, the more, the opposition, the CAQ and the Liberal, for instance, and the Parti Conservateur of Éric Duhaime, they're gonna warn people. If you vote for the PQ, there's going to be a referendum. We don't want a referendum. It's
going to be a referendum day one, is what they said.
And don't forget one thing. The Liberal Party of Quebec is going like this right now, slowly but surely. Why? Because the PQ is going like that. If you have no PQ, you have no Liberal Party, because the Liberal Party for so many decades based their elections on the fact that we don't want a referendum. The best thing that could happen to the Parti Libéral is the fact that the PQ is gaining in popularity. So I'll have to say that this is going to be quite tough. As for your question, quite tough for Plamondon. As for your question, I would say that here again, Poilievre will attract the same voters than the PQ and the CAQ, which is a most populist. And to be fair with the PQ voters, there's some of them. I don't know what the percentage is right now, but some of them who are not populist at all, who are left wing or center left. They don't like those identity stuff, who are repressive and or encroachment to the Charter of Rights. But they are with the PQ because they want the independence, and they think that the PQ is the best vehicle to get there and all that, which I do respect, obviously. But the thing is that there's a lot of people in the PQ right now, because most of the people who stayed in the PQ are the people who decided not to go to Québec solidaire at the time of the Charte des Valeurs, which was a very demagogic, like piece of shit, if you want my opinion. So those who stay there in the PQ, there's a lot of them who agree with Bill 96, who agree with Bill 21, who agreed at the time with Charter of Values, if I can call it that way. So that means that this is the same, here again, the same pool of voters than the Conservatives. So it's going to be like quite tough. And don't forget one thing: François Legault at the last federal election did ask the voters to vote for the Conservative. Remember that. He went public. Say, I propose to the Quebecers to vote for the Conservative because they are representing Quebec interests, because I don't like Trudeau. But think about it. That was a clear slap in the face of Blanchet, Bloc Québécois, because Blanchet for so many years, at the House of Commons, everything that I was saying was the lines of François Legault. If François Legault wanted something, François Blanchet will repeat that like a parrot the day after, saying, this is the demand of Quebec, this is what we want, and that's it, and that's all. But when was the time of the election, then Legault said, don't vote for the Bloc, that's a waste of time, please vote for the Conservative. So I'm quite sure that Blanchet next time in 2026, if he's still there, and if Legault is still there, is going to be very, very harsh about the CAQ. Obviously, he's going to be behind the PQ, that's for sure, but he's going to be very aggressive towards the CAQ.
Interesting. With let's say 2026, it's the Conservatives are in power. We vote in the PQ. What happens when they vote for the referendum between them and the Conservatives? How is that going to play out?
Well, as of today, the chances are that Poilievre will be Prime Minister of Canada and Plamondon would be Premier of Quebec, right? as of today. I mean,
as of today, we're hypothesizing.
Yeah, but for Poilievre, I think it's kind of a done deal, frankly. For Plamondon, I'm not sure at all because
I'm not sure either.
they're going to split vote with the CAQ, and I would not be surprised if there's a government of Legault or whoever, Geneviève Guilbeault, a minoritarian, or anyway, we'll see. But if we're talking about referendum, obviously it's because Plamondon would have been elected as the premier of Quebec. So that's here again and again and again. It's going to be fun to watch because you're going to have a Poilievre, which is a right-wing guy, and Plamondon, who's saying I'm left, but on identity, immigration, and most of the things, I mean, is on the right side. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I would not be happy to be in Plamondon's shoes if I was fighting against Poilievre, even especially for a referendum, because this guy, I'm repeating the same story, but take a look at what's happening on social media. He did learn from the best, and the best, unfortunately, is Donald Trump and all those people. He's gonna be like quite a machine to beat, quite sure.
What happened in Quebec from a traditionally the socialist state of North America? What happened? What is with this sudden and extreme shift to the right over the past 5 years?
See, I don't agree with the assertion.
Correct me.
I'm going to tell you why. Because we love to say that Quebec is so left-wing. We are so progressive. We are so better than you, blah, 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 blah. All right. It's true to say that we did adopt some social progressive measures here and there with the CPR at $5 and all that. And we did work towards equality, men and women, that's for sure, and other stuff like that. But take a look at the last 40 decades. Who are really left-wing as government? The first government of René Lévesque in 1976. Second government of René Lévesque was not at left at all. I mean, it did cut like the salary of public servant like crazy and all that. There was nothing left in there. I'm not saying that it was not right to do so. I'm just saying this is not a left-wing measure. And there were no left-wing measure in the second mandate of Lévesque, as far as I recall. After that, who came into power? Robert Bourassa in 1985. Is Robert Bourassa was a left-wing guy? Not in 1985. I mean, he was kind of right-wing guy. He was that close to Brian Mulroney, right?
Right.
After that, who came into power? Daniel Johnson, who replaced Bourassa. He was not elected, but whatever. He was the next premier. He was even more right-wing than Bourassa. After that, who took the place? Jacques Parizeau. Jacques Parizeau was a left-wing guy. This is true. But the guy is, I mean, left for after like 18 months about. He was there for a weekend, right? So who did take the place after? Lucien Bouchard. Lucien Bouchard was clearly right-wing. Clearly, he was the good friend with Mike Harris. He was in Ontario. He was adopting the same kind of measures, cutting and fighting the unions and all that, organizing like summit like in Salazar in Portugal, saying this is what we're going to do things here. I mean, Lucien Bouchard was a real conservative, and my point is it's correct. I mean, they have the right to do so. But the thing is, don't tell me that Lucien Bouchard was left-wing. That's bullshit. Who take the place of Bouchard after that? Bernard Landry, who was there for a very short period of time. Afterwards, we have Jean Charest for like 10 years. Is Jean Charest a left-wing guy? Come on, he's from the conservative with Bouchard. I mean, the guy is clearly center right-wing. Then you had Pauline Marois, who was there for a weekend as well. Was she like left-wing? Really? Okay, what did she do in terms of left programs? Nothing, in my opinion, because they fought against, they fought on the side of the Carré Rouge, and but when she got elected, she did adopt some, similar measure than what Jean Charest did propose at the time. There was some slightly difference, but still. So afterwards, who do we have? We have Philippe Couillard. Did Philippe Couillard was a left-wing guy? Come on, not at all. I mean, the guy was saying like l'austérité and all this and all that. And then, since 2018, we have François Legault. Is François Legault a left-wing guy? So take a look to the picture of the last 40-something years. And I would say you have three prime ministers who were mostly left-wing, which is Parizeau, Landry, and Marois. But they were there like for a year and something each.
And then we could say Lévesque. Potentially.
Yeah, well, from my opinion, we had in our history for the last century, we have three governments who were clearly progressive. We had the government of Adélard Godbout between those two mandates from Duplessis during the Second Great War. We had after that, obviously, Jean Lesage, which René Lévesque was part of his government. And after that, we have the first government of René Lévesque. That's it. The second one was not on the left side. So it's only three government. And the thing is, even center or right-wing government can produce left-wing measure. Think about the CPE, the kindergarten stuff. That was under Lucien Bouchard, right?
And even the CAQ right now, they're funding anyone who is lacking in the remainder of their funds for childcare. Like the CAQ is still doing some progressive measures.
Yeah, and obviously,
even though they're right.
I agree with that. I mean, obviously, you can adopt right-wing measure if you're left on the left side, and the other way around is also true. But take a look at those figures. Take a look at those programs. And for the very most part of the last 4 decades, we had, center or right-wing government, which is, I'm not saying it's the end of the world, actually, but I think it's untrue to say that we are so more progressive than other words. I remember a survey in 2011 that was in Le Devoir. Are you in favor or against the death penalty? Quebecers were in favor for 67% of Quebecers were in favor at the time, that 2011. In the rest of Canada was 63, which is, with the margin of error. No, but that's huge, right? But we don't see surveys like that because I think that we want to protect, the perception that we are so much more progressive. It's true that in terms of environment, we are more on the green side, which is wonderful. But economically,
the Bloc Québécois has the second best green platform for the environment, which is
hilarious. But it's easy to have a green platform when it's sure that you're not going to ensure power at one point, right? I mean, if you're the Bloc, you have the easy part. You can say whatever you like. You will never form the government. So, but as for the rest, on the green side, I think that Quebec is way above other provinces, but at the same time, if each and every citizen in the world were polluting as each and every Quebecer, it would take 4 planets to make sure that it's crazy. I mean, Quebecers are polluting, are creating GES for 4 planets. Can you believe that? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane.
So yes, and when we are asked, are you in favor of an environment? Who's the idiot is going to say, I'm in the favor? Obviously, you're in favor. But are you ready to do things in favor? That's some. Are you going to vote for a government, for a party that promised that is going to cut this or cut that? Or remember the Quebec Solidaire, the last election, right? What happened? They proposed a very, very reasonable measure saying that for certain type of cars that are polluting too much, we're going to add a new tax. That was the tax orange. That was the end of the world. Oh my God, we can't vote for QS. Those are a bunch of communists. And when they proposed that after $1 million of assets, you will be paying another kind of tax. Here again, it's like it was Stalin that was proposing that, and we decided to vote against that. So if you're really left wing, you don't care about paying a bit more tax if you have more than 1 million in asset, and if you are that green, you don't mind, paying that tax for that big,
Right.
right? Mm-hmm. That's it.
So where does the reputation come from in Quebec that we're more socialist or more progressive? Where does that reputation come from?
I think that we like to compare ourselves to Alberta, because for a lot of commentators, the rest of Canada is Alberta. Take a look at Alberta. It's crazy with the South bitumineux and their eating and kids and all that. And frankly, I don't like Alberta at all. I've been there a few times. There's no way I could live there for more than few days because of those policies. The people there are cool. I mean, they're good people and all that. But the policies of Alberta, especially with Daniel Smith for me, or Ralph Lyon in the past, for me, it's crazy. I mean, I just don't identify myself there. But take a look. You can read some. I would say I've made my master in political science at McGill at the time, and most of the work there, when they were talking about federalism, they were talking about Quebec and Alberta. Well, we need to compare those both. I mean, the rest of Canada is not Alberta. It's Ontario, it's the Maritimes, it's the British Columbia, because you have some very progressive movement in BC, for instance. You have
I find BC and Quebec more comparable.
Yes, frankly, but it's easy to it fits more the narrative if you compare yourself to Alberta, who are eating kids, right? Saying, I mean, they're eating kids. We don't, so we must be left wing. But we are the only province who did not have a serious left wing government, except maybe the first one of René Lévesque and in the past Jean Lesage and maybe Godbout. But take a look at most of those other provinces. Ontario had Bob Rae. That was a catastrophe. I'm not saying that we need to go there. I'm just saying, well, Ontario was way more left wing at the time than we were. Take a look in the NDP in the BC, the NDP in Manitoba right now. The NDP is Saskatchewan. Take a look at Tim Douglas. I mean, those guys are coming from West Canada, not from Alberta, but there are other provinces than Alberta.
Yeah. I don't know. I as a BC person myself, I find the NDP.
Are you from BC?
Yeah, I'm from Vancouver.
Vancouver. What part of Vancouver?
East Van.
East. Okay, cool.
I look like a walking stereotype of East Van. It's like got that long hair, the hippie with like all the tattoos. It's like, is it a punk? Is it a hippie? It's someone.
Doesn't matter. It's probably both. If you love it.
Yeah, exactly. That's East Van. But what I was going to say is my problem with the NDP is actually, in my opinion, they are about equivalent to our federal liberals. They're very center, very center, except for a few things for a couple things, like they're progressive with social values, but they're definitely centrist, like a little right of center when it comes to economic policy. They're very much capitalists. And I don't love that there's this reputation of NDPs in BC being left. I'm like, they're not left. They're centrist. They're how people perceive here.
But at the time of was it Clark? Clark was more left wing, right? And
we've had some really left wing folks.
Yeah. This is I'm not talking about the NDP right now because they're more center left. But Clark was pretty left wing.
Yes, you're right. Clark and I believe Tommy Douglas comes from BC,
Saskatchewan.
Oh, he's Saskatchewan.
Yes, Tommy Douglas is the father of the healthcare system.
Yeah, he invented
the healthcare system, and I mean, he had a lot of influence on the Trudeau's government in '72, right? Yeah. Because he was detaining the rest of the balance of the power in a way, and Trudeau was happy about it because he did implement a lot of left wing measure, and he did use that excuse. With his MP saying, well, maybe you don't like those left-wing measures, but we don't have any choice because the NDP is supporting us. If the NDP leaves us alone, then we're going to be screwed up and we're going to have to go to election. So I have to say that it's very more complex than that. I think that Quebec might be obviously in terms of culture is totally different than the rest of Canada. That's obvious
Yeah.
because of the French and the culture and the history and all of this. I mean, there's no. I mean, for me, it's no discussion there. But in terms of left wing and right wing, are we way more progressive than other parts of Canada? I mean, I've
We're
been to
not.
Maritimes a lot of time, and in New Brunswick, for instance, frankly, are they like more right wing than us? I didn't see that. I mean, they have
You're
a
right.
lot of contacts. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to compare like apple with oranges, obviously, but you know, we like to self proclaim ourselves. We are. It's like a moral statement, superiority.
It is a moral statement. We're Quebec. We're a little bit more moral than the rest of the country.
Yes, yes, it
We're
is.
secular. We don't involve religion in our politics because we're moral.
Yeah,
And
correct.
it's like fair enough. I agree that that is the right choice.
Yeah,
I don't agree with how you're doing it necessarily, but
yeah, yeah, correct.
that's
As for
a
a
really
moral, oh, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
no. I apologize.
Yeah. My point was, I talked about the survey on death penalty. I mean, a few years later, I mean, the score were reversed, and Quebec was less supporting death penalty, but not at 22%. I mean, at 49 or at 52, whatever. So the point is that there is not so much differences between Quebec and the rest of Canada on a lot of aspects. I'm not talking about culture and identity. I'm talking about moral issues here, and that's it. Yeah. So we can self-proclaim ourselves like we're better than this and better than that, but I'm not sure that it's correct in reality. And if you take a look to the surveys on the importance of the Canadian Charter of Rights, more than 80% of Quebecers think that the Charter of Rights has, an important value in our society. I mean, most of people will not know that or will not, plead that, but that's the truth. The Quebecers are attached to fundamental rights, less those last few years because of what happened, but for a pretty long period of time, there is no way that fundamental rights were not important. I mean, they are part of our identity. And I'm not only talking about the Canadian Charter of Rights, which is very controversial, obviously, with the repatriation, Trudeau, and all that. But take a look at the Quebec Charter of Rights, which is quite similar on many aspects to the Canadian Charter of Rights. I mean, we did vote that charter, even though the Canadian Charter was not existing at the time. This is a clear statement. And take a look to the statement of René Lévesque. He said the Quebec Charter of Rights, is part of our identity. It's part of us. This is the Quebec identity. The Quebec nation identity is based notably on that Quebec Charter of Rights, which says a lot. You will never hear François Legault say that today. You'll never hear Saint-Pierre Plamondon say that today. Fundamental rights like a carpet. They don't care. I mean, you can do whatever you like with the carpet. But at the time, that was quite the opposite. And hopefully, at one point, that will come back.
I I don't know if I fully agree with you, just because in my view, Quebec has a higher respect for things such as democracy and the rights of the people. And I think it's because of the aristée.
Because of what?
Because of separatism, not separatism, because of secularism.
Yeah.
Laïcité.
Maybe.
And for me, even though it might not be talked about as much, I don't find someone like Legault as problematic as Poilievre, because Poilievre does not seem to give a shit about human rights in the same way that, as far as I can tell, Legault does. Legault seems to respect the law.
Really?
Oh, you don't think so? I mean, you don't have to agree with me.
Not at first, but that's a very interesting point of view. I never thought about it that way. For me, Poilievre is Legault are the same on the fundamental right. They don't give a shit at all. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question just for the fun of it. I mean, tell me just an example where Legault did stand for fundamental rights. except of the French, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's hard to. It's one of those things where you're like, well, he says a lot of things that I think are correct, but then in practice, you might be right because, you know, he talks a lot about francophone rights, and when it comes to the election, I don't think he's somebody who's an election denier. I don't think he's somebody who says, "Oh, immigrants are ruining our elections." I think he respects the fundamental practice of a democracy, of a truly expressive society.
Let me give you a counter example.
Okay.
How do you say that? Systemic racism?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the right word? Systemic?
That's it. Yeah.
Legault said, at first he said, there's no racism in Quebec. He said that in 2018. There's no racism. Holy shit. Okay. And then he had to say, well, you know, there's some kind of racism, but blah, blah, blah. But the guy is still not accepting the evidence about the systemic racism. He's saying that it does not exist in Quebec. The SPVM is saying, well, it does exist. We are practicing racial profiling. I mean, I guess they have a good idea of what they're doing, right? Is the chief of the SPVM saying systemic racism exists. You have the same in the Quebec, the Commission Québécoise des droits de la personne is saying precisely the same thing. We have the Canadian, all those intervenants have evidence about the fact that it does exist. The Superior Court of Quebec 2 years ago, and a few days ago, there was Justice was that Blondin? I don't recall. Anyway, who said, for the racial profiling, they said that systemic racism exists in Quebec. We need to fight it. It's against Charter of Rights. It's again, obviously, the Canadian Charter of Rights, and obviously against the Quebec Charter of Rights. We need to fight that. And the court did convict the SPVM, the city of Montreal, to pay something like $50 million to those victims. So the only thing that François Legault is doing with those decisions from the court is appealing from them. He does not recognize the fundamental right at all. The only rights that he's fighting for are the rights that are related to the French language in a way, which are what we call the collective right, which are, they are essential. I'm not saying the opposite, obviously, but when is the last time that François Legault did fight for a fundamental right that is not related to the French? Frankly, I don't recall. Maybe I'm forgetting about something, but
I thought they did a good job handling the situation with Maison, the safe consumption site down in Saint-Henri.
Oh yeah, well that's a good one.
That was a good one. I thought they did a great job with something like that, where you're like, oh, that was very human rightsy progressive.
Unusual. Okay. 1-0.
That's a good example where I'm like, but it also could, I think, we'll see what happens, but it could mark a shift in how some of the provincial politics goes. I have found that, generally speaking, whatever the conservative government or whatever the federal government is doing, usually the provincial governments kind of swing the opposite direction. Yeah. Because look at Manitoba right now. It's got a very left government, and as federally we're shifting right, and you're like, oh, that's interesting, and you can usually see that going during the Conservatives under Harper. What was Ontario? Kathleen Wynne. It was left. It was center left, right?
You know what? This is what I like about federalism. I'm not a big fan of Canada, frankly. I'm not obsessed by Canada. I'm not obsessed.
It's hard to love Canada.
I don't really care about Canada, to be frank. And I'm not saying it in a bad way, just that I don't really care about those things, frankly. But I think it's good. One of the best things about federalism is that you can have counterbalance, right? That's why federalism work in a lot of countries, because you have counterbalance. Sometimes you have, as you say, a federal government that is more left-wing, then you have the opposite in certain provinces, and the other way around is true as well. And let me just give you, if you want, a counterexample of the thing about the consumption heroines and I don't know how you call that precisely in English, but remember during the pandemic, there were a measure about the curfew. Everyone has to go home at 8 o'clock and at night and blah blah blah. You recall that? Which I thought it was a good measure at the time. Maybe I was wrong, but anyway, that's not the point. My point is that they did that, like the Legault's government did that in his usual way, which is like à la va-vite, and as we say in French, like that was botch. And they did order the homeless people. Think about it. They did order the homeless people to go home by 8 o'clock. The thing is that if you're a homeless people, by definition, you don't have any home. You are homeless. And a few people, the commentators, me and others, and lawyers said, well, the fuck is that? I mean, you cannot ask a homeless people to find a home by 8. I mean, he doesn't have any home. And Legault said, well, it's important that he goes home because if he doesn't and the police arrest him, he's going to say whatever. Well, no, he's going to bullshit. It's going to be too hard to apply. I mean, I thought that you were thinking more highly about your own policeman, but that's something else. The truth is that we need a decision from the Superior Court who struck down that bylaw about the homeless, saying this is an encroachment to the Charter of Rights. It doesn't make sense, which is obvious. We're talking about the gros bon sens of Pierre Poilievre a few minutes ago. But for François Legault, that was like, well, it's too complicated. Everyone goes home by 8 o'clock. So all that to say that I really love your example, the recent one that we talk about. But I'm not sure this is usual at the CAC level. I think it's more an exception.
It's tough because like as much as that was a failure, so they're like, oh, you got to go home, les sans-abri. It's like that doesn't make sense, bro. Like, but they were very on it with the with protecting people with COVID. They were very on top of their game, and at the beginning of the pandemic had quite a high approval rating from their COVID measures. Which is interesting.
Oh yeah.
So it's complicated in that point because you're right. They didn't respect the homeless folks, or I don't know if they didn't respect. It seems more like they're just stupid than not respecting. I don't know what he was thinking.
You're right.
But like,
you know what? Ironically, I was supporting government Legault for most of its measure during the pandemic because I thought that this is what we needed to do.
I thought so. Quebec was with him.
Yeah, and I mean, the score he had in the polls were like crazy, and I think he deserved it at the time. That was not perfect, obviously, but I mean, most government in the world did the perfect score anyway. I think they did pretty well. They were based on science most of the time. I didn't like Arruda, who was a clown, in my opinion, but as for the rest, I mean, they did pretty well. But this is like exceptional measure for exceptional situation. But if you take a look at what happened on fundamental rights aside of the pandemic management, I'm not sure it's a gold medal, frankly.
No, you're right. It's, Yep. Anyways, we can call it there. All of my illusions are dispelled now. My hopes and dreams for a progressive Quebec crushed underneath the savage assessment of Frédéric Bérard. Hopefully one day we can see a Quebec that fights for the poor and lower class. Until then, keep it tuned.